Okay, sorry guys for the start. I haven't used TradingView for the streams for quite some time, so this one's going to be a quick one, like I've been doing on YouTube. This one's going to be a quick one, just to cover, I suppose, going into the weekend. So a couple of days back, I actually wrote this particular post, and this one was just covering really the last 12 months of the posts that I've actually put out there. A lot of these are already through TradingView. So coming from the very start, the first one back in December, talking about the kind of correlation, DXY, gold, and so on, so on. And then from there into the Bitcoin reaccumulation. Okay, so if I go back and I'll show this particular post, this was on the January 23rd, you can actually see what I was talking about here was why we had kind of a value range. From the value range, the possibilities in terms of the accumulation or reaccumulation in this particular point, and then ultimately up, from there. So there's a lot of depth in this particular post. And then this takes us through to the first part, the first phase. Okay. Now, scrolling down through the next bit, again, there's information. So this is actually the last post. You see this one, December the 7th. And obviously just covering the last year. So this one was where it gets really interesting. Okay, so in February, I was looking at what I call the value area, and the value area was this. Okay, so ultimately, I was expecting the price to pull back to this level before that accumulation phase would start. And this is where the rocket call, I'll come into this one in a second. This is where the rocket call was then made in March. And then ultimately the roadmap was written at the end of March. And at the moment, we've had no real deviation in the bigger picture. Okay, so playing this out, I'll just press play on this. Playing this out, you'll actually see that we've moved away. We've stuck basically around. We've used this support level a couple of times. This was a 2618 from the 2011 low. We then push down straight into the value area, and you can see it's right in the center. So that was obviously back from February. We didn't really tag that area until the 19th of May. We kind of accumulated back in this position, and kind of up we started to move. Okay, so you can see it was hugging the level, and then ultimately up we go. Okay, so in this particular one, I then put the extra bit of detail in here, and this brought us to the rocket call. This is what a lot of you guys probably follow me would know me for. This is what I was talking about back in March. The reasons, the logic. You can see we had a decent drop to A, up to B, C. Now, basically, what happened here was B, C, D. They were all $2,500 off based on the daily range rather than an 8-hour range. And basically, it meant that the B was up 2,500, C was pulled up 2,500, and so was D. E was always going to be the extension level. That was the overall target. That goes back to the post I've just posted, obviously in February at this point. And then, like I said, coming into March, it was basically end of March, and this was actually writing out the roadmap. Okay, so you can see on this one here, the 26th of March, the expectations was 3 down to 4. We had a shallow and deep area, and then basically from there across into the range, obviously accumulation, and then up we go. So overall, that was, big picture. That was what I was aiming for. That's what I was looking for as a whole. And then I started putting some educational stuff out. People were asking me questions, and it just become kind of overbearing in terms of the amount of questions I was getting. So I started putting a little bit more education behind why I was using these, what I was calling, how I was seeing this. This covers the psychology, some of the mentality, play around with obviously some art, and all the way through. I mean, everything from dark pools and so on. I skipped forward a couple of months, and I was actually looking at, in September, I was actually looking at this level here. I'll zoom in a little bit there. I was actually looking at this level here as a top level, given the extensions that we were seeing in the bottom in this particular range. So I think this was then October or November time. I'm just going to skip down a bit further. So October, November time, October 27th. So literally a month after calling this, you can actually see that the level was tagged, and then we rejected off that level. We come back up. We had a bit of a fake out, I guess, from there, and then we've literally dropped all the way down to this particular cluster. So at the moment, over the last year, it's been brilliant to see Bitcoin becoming more institutionalized, becoming more professional. And I've obviously covered a lot of this content on TradingView. We've covered an awful lot more in terms of Discord, especially for the subscribers. This last chart here is to do with the COT situation and so on and so on. And basically why we were seeing this particular drop happening at the levels that we've already called. So we've put this all the way back from, December last year being the first one here, this one, and then all the way through to why the accumulation, why the distribution, how the distribution, kind of key levels and roadmap for the distribution. So we've covered all of this all the way up through the year. So coming now ultimately into the weekend, and this was the point for this particular stream, was I just wanted to touch on where we are currently and what I'm seeing. So there's a couple of things that I've actually added to the chart. And again, if you're in our Discord, you've probably already seen this. We've actually got a point and figure projection target down a bit lower. Now, it's not to say that we're going to kind of zip straight down there and off we go again, but it is something that's very keen for me in terms of the overall level. So now it's just a question of what phase we're actually in, whether or not this was the initial high, and we've got some kind of expanded flat. I think if we have that, we're probably likely to be only in the A phase of a much bigger move, which means we can go back up and test these kinds of ranges and then back down to kind of complete that, giving us a much bigger accumulation phase for a much, much bigger time frame. So I think if I was to summarize where we are right now, I think we're actually in the monthly 3 being this, and on the way down to a monthly 4. Obviously, I'm going to cover that in a few more of the videos over the next couple of days and leading up into Christmas, of exactly why we are where we are. So obviously that's going to be YouTube, that's going to be our Discord, and then I'll ultimately put a bit more kind of logic to underpin some of these moves. We then have the value area range. So there's a couple of key targets, and if I overlay the point and figure chart, you can actually see a value area sitting right in the target area. So for me, 35 still remains a pretty interesting level as a whole. We've come down, we've tagged the target area, we've bounced off that. I think we're going to be sat in this range for a little bit, so between 42 and 54 currently. And then I think from there, it's the character really that's going to give us a bit of an idea in terms of where next and then why. So like I said, I think I'll be covering that in the next couple of streams. So what have we got here? December levels, just a couple of key levels, a couple of interesting angles. And then if I zoom out, I guess let's go into the weekly. Let's have a look. I think this was on the weekly range. These are obviously some of the older ones going back to November, December. I had the channel in August, which was the breakout. I can't seem to find the weekly forecast. There we go. So this was ultimately in relation to the move back in March that I've just shown on the roadmap. So the only thing that's really changed for me is that potentially, and I say potentially because if we do get a change of character as the pullback comes in here, then yes, we could go a little bit higher to complete a monthly 3. But if I'm working on the assumption that 3 is actually completed, then realistically, we're actually going to be in accumulation around this, probably over Christmas into the new year. And then I would expect, obviously, a much bigger rally. I think if we get a rally from here without coming down, I think we're actually only going to go 72, maybe 83 at an absolute maximum. So I think it's all going to depend back on the character before we can say, definitively, yes, this is now ready to go and where I'm interested in getting in. So anyway, I wanted to keep this one quite short. I know this is covering quite a few things and jumping in between different things, but you'll see if you come back to the post on the 7th of December, I've actually got, where's this one gone? I've actually got from the 7th of December, I've actually got the full year's worth of calls there, and every single image, if you click through them, you'll actually see the logic behind each of the calls, each of the moves, from that as well. So I'm going to leave it as it is for now. Have a great weekend. And obviously for you guys following, especially the subscribers, I'll probably put a video together, possibly tomorrow, with a little bit more detail, a little bit of depth in terms of what I've just covered in this one. So, yeah, enjoy the weekend, and